There's been a lot of talk. We have spent a lot of time talking about the rental market here in Montreal now for quite some time. Then an interesting study just out now from rental website rentcafe.com. They've released their report on the most sought-after Canadian cities for renters, not homeowners, renters in the third quarter. So I thought we'd try to find out a bit more. Where are those renters going these days, and what kind of changes are we seeing? Brooklyn Lewandowski is a senior account executive at rentcafe.com and on the line. Thanks so much for being here this afternoon.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Yeah, let me begin by asking, and obviously we'll get to Montreal in a second, but with respect to what you're seeing here, biggest jumps, most popular places, how much has changed?
So things are kind of consistently changing over the course of the year as the rental market evolves and as renters change, renters search during different times of the year. Something that we've seen as a big jump is, different cities that are a little bit smaller than those main areas, seeing a greater position on the top, such as Moncton, New Brunswick, Halifax, and Regina as well. So that's been something a little bit different compared to some of the previous quarters as well.
All right. Can you, by the way, describe the methodology you use? Because when we say popular cities, how do we determine this?
Yeah, absolutely. So the renter interest report is based off of, just as it sounds, the interest that renters have in the different cities across our platform. So the report uses data from rentcafe.com, which is an apartment search website covering Canadian properties. It selects 25 Canadian cities with a relevant listing inventory sample. So what we're looking at is availability rate, page views of those listings, favorited listings, and then saved searches. So personalized searches that the user is saving to come back to on their own.
Okay. And so based on that, let's go through this list. And let's start with, from what you found here, Canada's top renter city, or at least renter interest city, is what?
The top renter city is Moncton, New Brunswick. And what we've seen with that is really a great interest in, relative affordability, job growth, and then attracting renters actually from other provinces. So what we're seeing is people moving from Halifax, Toronto, or Montreal over to Moncton.
Okay, and by the way, I should point out as well, if I read this right, you also determine which people or where they're moving from. And if I read it right for Moncton, people within the city are moving, right? They're the ones renting, not so much from outside the city. Is that right?
So it's a combination. There are people from within the city who are moving, but Moncton's has actually grown by about 71,000 newcomers within the past year. So we also saw people from Halifax, Toronto, and Montreal moving into Moncton.
Okay. Some of the others surprising to me, but then again, it says here that Moncton overtook Winnipeg, right, as the most popular rental city. And I thought, do people not know they have winter in Winnipeg? But that's just me. So are you starting to see a shift here? Because I noticed Halifax on the list as well to Atlantic Canada.
Mm-hmm. So job growth plays a factor into that. Affordability is a very big piece that's kind of factoring into different people's decisions. But also to Winnipeg specifically, we've seen very, very stable market there with very low vacancy. So there's not a lot of availability within that space. So what we see particularly in Q3, as typically searches slow down, people are really looking for what apartments are actually available for them to move into. So that has even played a factor into why we've seen a slowdown in Montreal's traffic as well, because we're kind of past that main leasing season.
Okay, well, let's talk. You brought up Montreal, so let's talk about it. We dropped a couple of spots here. Where are we now?
So in Q3, you are at the 24th rank on the list. We started at about 20 at the beginning of the year, and it slowly declined. And that makes perfect sense to us in the way that renters search. In the beginning of the year, particularly because of the leasing season in Montreal being that July 1 typical transition time, what we see is renters are really starting their major search standpoint between about January to March. March is really the time where renters are starting to reach out and make contact with the groups, and then they'll start making their decisions between March and that June 1st timeline.
All right. So with respect to that, I should point out, and I think most people here know it, this is unique to Quebec, I guess, or to Montreal anyway, this idea of July 1st being moving day. You don't have this across the rest of the country.
Correct.
Okay. So that's the reason, perhaps, as you just said now, why you're seeing stuff slow down in the third quarter here. Do you ask people when people go on, because you have some really interesting data here. You list page views, which is people going on the website to, actually look for things. Do you notice a difference now? Say, like, take a place like Vancouver, where we know rents are so high. Do they see the same thing typically there or not?
So they don't quite see the same thing. It's a little bit different, particularly because the weather sometimes is a little bit more amenable to moving throughout the course of the year. But we have seen a little bit of slowdown. This is a general time for all markets to slow down, particularly as we move into the holiday season. But Vancouver's sitting around 11th on our list. And, a big factor that comes into play, this is something I'm talking to my clients across the country about, is, for a long time, because markets were so stable, there wasn't necessarily a big need for representation on some of these online platforms and to put a lot of money into being represented here. And so now what we're seeing is a bigger push in all of the markets to have a better representation online. And that kind of impacts the way that renters are looking through these different listings as well.
Okay, so you mentioned Moncton and we mentioned Halifax. You also do a breakdown here, I think, of smaller Canadian cities. What did you find there?
So what we found in some of those smaller cities is sort of a similar idea. We've got Hamilton is surging up 12 spots. We saw Guelph kind of moving up the list as well. Like you said, Winnipeg has dropped a little bit, but it's still sitting fairly high. That was at the fourth place. Kingston is up there at 5. We're also seeing that Edmonton and Calgary spaces. They're definitely moving up the list as their vacancy increases in their space too.
I would ask as well, because, we hear so much about Toronto, the condo market, et cetera, how expensive things have become. What did you find in Toronto specifically?
In Toronto specifically, what I'm seeing, it's fairly stable. There's still availability, but to your point, yes, we do see higher rents there, similar to Vancouver too. So the market has softened a little bit. Vacancy is rising in Toronto as well. So they've dropped 2 spots over the renter interest list. They're down at 14 now on our list.
Yeah, but Ontario, you say, still attracts the most renter interest of all the provinces.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Okay, and I'm just wondering as well, if I look down the list, Canada's top 10 trending cities, so we mentioned Moncton at number 1, Halifax at number 2. We count Halifax as a small city?
Relatively compared to some of the other larger environments, but like we said, we're seeing a greater level of interest in that sort of Atlantic portion. So we're seeing more people move in that direction. Okay.
I'll just go through the list for people listening. So you have, it says Halifax at number 2. You have Regina, Saskatchewan, number 3. Winnipeg, Kingston, Ontario, Edmonton, Saskatoon, Victoria, Calgary, and finally Ottawa. With respect to the province that gets the most, I think I just mentioned this, right? It is Ontario. Where does Quebec fall on that list? Is there still interest in moving to Quebec that you see?
There's definitely still interest in moving to Quebec. What we find is prospects change throughout the term of the year, right? So in Q3, it's come down a little bit, but we still have interest there. We're still seeing a lot of interest in the east, but the prairies are bringing up a greater level of space just because of availability, essentially.
All right. We will leave it at that. I thank you so much. Appreciate your time this afternoon.
Thank you as well. You have a wonderful day.
I'm Luke Wilson. Join me each week for Film Never Lies. Since retiring from the NFL, I've had a lot on my mind, and now I've got my own show. So if you're tired of lazy takes, if you want honest conversations, join us each week. Film Never Lies, available on all TSN platforms and the iHeartRadio app.